Evening all. Yeah, look what I found. A CD rack. All those people are going, oh, you boomers with your hard copy DVD CD. What boomer? Yeah, well, I've got entertainment on tap, and you don't. So, yeah, let's move on with what has overall been rather a depressing week in the news. Well, it's been a pretty bleak week. I tweeted out this time last week. I thought a revolution was taking place. This was the revolution was now, because it all kicked off. It wasn't just the Black Lives Matter protesters. What the hell are they doing in Britain? Because we don't have the kinds of deaths in custody of BAME suspects that they do in America. So it's literally is just transplanting an American issue onto Britain and trying to gaslight people into thinking that our problems are America's problems, and they aren't. Certainly not in that regard. And we had Antifa kicking off, and we had all the middle-class leftist activists out on the streets defacing statues and monuments and toppling statues and the rest of it. What I felt was why it was a revolution, not just a sort of bunch of Herberts trashing the place, was that their actions seemed to have the assent and were complicit with the media, mainstream media, academia, the police force who sat back and did nothing for most of this week, and the chattering class. They're all on board with this. So that's why I felt that it was pretty much revolution that was going on, because so many important groups who try and dominate life in the UK and in America, but I'm going to speak mainly from the UK perspective, seem to be backing the violent activists and the hooligans and the vandals. And I thought that was different. That's the difference between other, just say, poll tax riots or the London riots of about a decade ago, or any other things. You know, that now the mainstream media is still going, oh, isn't this terrible, all this violence, no matter where it comes from. They're actually giving the thumbs up and massaging the news and distorting the facts in order to promote their narratives. Now, it has been pointed out by people like Peter Hitchens that the revolution probably began 20 years ago. I would add a caveat to that. I think the conditions for a revolution have been building up over a 20-year period. It's like setting up the pins, but it needs a trigger event, and I think this week was the trigger event. How it's going to end up, I don't know. I don't. The doubt is where the power lays in this country, because normally you would think that you have a government that holds a mandate from the voters, is the centre of gravity of power in the United Kingdom. And we've seen that this is not the case. This is confirming a lot of my worries of the last few months, where I say the right keep winning elections, but they don't control anything. They have no power. Again, Peter Hitchens mentions this, that the Conservative government are in office, but they don't hold any power. I think this is true. So what we're left with is people all this week, and myself included, I was very noisy. I think I wrote to 9 MPs in total saying, what are you going to do about this? You know, our statues are being vandalised. There's left-wing violent thugs on our street. Our media is complicit. You know, what are you doing to reassert control? You know, what are you doing to protect ordinary citizens? And it's taken them long enough. They were issuing statements, a lot of these Conservative MPs, saying, isn't it terrible what's going on? It's just terrible. It is. And I go, yeah, you're in government. What are you doing about it? What are you doing to stop it? It looks like slowly they're going to be doing something like up to 10 years in prison if convicted of vandalising public memorial, public statue. But at the same time, there's things like, what are we going to do about media? What are we going to do about academia? What are we going to do about the left's long march through the institutions that have been going on for 20 years? And that's where I seriously think the focus has got to shift. Now, the revolutionaries have not completely won yet. They've made incredible inroads, but we're still talking. We are. It's not totalitarian yet. Things are getting cancelled all the time, and it's getting worse in that regard. And it's a bleak time, but we still have some wriggle room to push back. Now, earlier on this week, I wish I could remember who this guy was who I was having a disagreement with on Twitter. I wish I could remember his name and the account, because on Monday, the Colston statue came down, and he said, "You're getting upset about a slave trader statue." And I was, well, it's where it all leads to. As we've seen iconoclasm in other countries. And he says, you and your slippery slope fallacy. Anybody who says slippery slope fallacy is trying to gaslight you, because it's no fallacy. Whenever the term the slippery slope is applied, it almost always is a slippery slope. It almost always leads to something worse. Which is why we didn't just have a statue of a slave trader come down, or even two statues of slave traders come down. No. All our national icons have a statue to them, or even the cenotaph. The cenotaph, which is a monument to people who fell in war defending the country, that has to be vandalized. The Union flag has to be vandalized now. And then it didn't stop there, because now we've got the corporate woke feeling that they need to wade in and start censoring things. And that was why Little Britain was pulled from Netflix, although the BBC they were almost going to do it. They haven't quite brought themselves to it. But David Walliams and Matt Lucas in the last 24 hours had to make a grovelling apology for their own creation. It's incredible. Art needs no apology. You just do it. And I understood the characters. I mean, whether you like Little Britain or not, I mean, I've got mixed feelings. There's some, the highs were very good, and there were some duds there as well. But having said that, nothing I thought Matt Lucas and David Walliams did was racist or sexist or homophobic. It was taking stereotypes and mocking a kind of stereotype. A lot of the characters that they created for that show were drawn from real life. So much comedy is drawn from real life. But no, it didn't stop there. Even if you think of something that is, just popular but not a classic like Little Britain, we move on to a definite classic, Fawlty Towers. The Germans episode has been pulled from UK TV play because of, well, nobody can quite agree on what it was in that episode. Was it mocking the Germans with Nazi salutes and goose stepping and mentioning the war, or was it the treatment of Manuel, or was it the Major's racist language? Nobody could quite agree on what it was in that episode. Or that episode also features a black doctor who treats Basil Fawlty, and people thought that wasn't a positive depiction of a black person. I always thought it was. I mean, he seems like a competent doctor who was able to calm down a manic Basil Fawlty at one episode in one moment. But the thing is, with the Major character, he is the butt of the joke. He uses the racist language. In the scene, he's talking about a date he once had with a woman, and he was using all this racist terminology. And he said, and then she got up and went somewhere and never came back. So his date abandoned him because he was such an obnoxious, racist bore. And the rest of the characters all react uncomfortably to the Major, and he's seen he's seen as a reactionary idiot who, at the end of the episode, ends up talking to a stuffed moose's head as if it's real. And it's just, but I sometimes think in the mind of the left, they 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 think like algorithms. It's funny that because we keep hearing about Google's algorithms, and I think people on the left think in terms of algorithms. Was the N word used? Yes, no. If yes, ban it. And they never look at, well, what context was it used in? When Matt Lucas and David Walliams did their characters, in what context was it used in? In other shows that have been, the latest one is the Father Ted episode. I think, so you're a racist, Father Ted, because at one stage, he impersonates a Chinese person. That's the joke. He does something and gets caught doing it, and he's humiliated doing it. And then there's another priest that has Nazi memorabilia, and like the algorithm goes, did Father Ted use a Chinese stereotype? Yes, no. Yes, ban it. Not that. Yes, he used it, but it was to make a joke at Father Ted's expense. And also, did it involve Nazis? Yes. If yes, ban it. But it's at no stage did it ever praise Nazis. But that's where we're at. Slippery slope, eh? I wish I could remember this guy because I could rub it in his face. Slippery slope, eh? Slippery slope. Father Ted, slippery slope. I'm not going to get out the Father Ted DVDs and show them. But this is the slope, and it's real. And anybody who tells you otherwise is a bloody liar. So we had another round of demonstrations on Saturday. More people breaking lockdown rules to go and protest because, hey, that's okay now. Of course, the double think there. People like Piers Morgan says, yes, I'm proud of my son for attending a demonstration. It's important. People must attend a demonstration. And then he wants to go after Dominic Cummings so much because that man broke lockdown, and he's remarkably silent on this weekend's protests because the wrong side are coming out. So we were warned in advance that if you're on the right, don't go into London to protest about the statues. And some didn't heed that warning. It was a trap. It was a trap. The police are now in the proper body armor, up for it. They're looking for trouble. And if you're on the right and you went in to London that day, ostensibly to protect a statue, then you were courting disaster because you would have been provoked by the left into action, and then that action would lead the police to heavily clamp down on you, not them. But some idiots went and did it. Members of the far right, and I think that the far right numbers were hugely exaggerated, but there were some there. Now, my opinions on the far right is that they're not a million miles away from the far left, and I wouldn't be surprised if they kind of, the far left and the far right kind of colluded to have a fight there, and that's what people went to London for. They went to London for a fight. Both of them. They went there looking for a fight. But what's sickening is how the media have reported this. Because last week, 27 police officers were injured in mostly peaceful protests. Yesterday, 6 police officers were injured by far-right violence. It's violence this week, but it was mostly peaceful. Last week, even though the casualty rates are vastly different, but this is a trap. It was a trap. The left put a baited trap in there, and some idiots on the right did it. I said yesterday we lost the optics on that one. And some people disagree with me, but they said they're going to call you a Nazi or a fascist anyway. I go, this is true, but if they're pointing to an empty space and saying Nazi's there, and it's just an empty space, it makes them look foolish. Now, bear in mind, when there was the Brexit celebrations in London, and also the freedom of speech demos in London, they went off remarkably peacefully, And when people said, "Ha ha, look at the Nazis," and they just saw people being very peaceful and happy and not causing trouble, they looked foolish. They didn't have a leg to stand on, and it kind of um, detoothed them. When they made those accusations. But now they can say, the fascists are out there, the far right, the Nazi, and they'll have they'll have a point. That's what the optics are there. If people from the right just didn't show up, because there was no need to. The statues were boarded up. It was a ridiculous state of affairs, but nonetheless, they were boarded up. And any violence, any aggression would have been entirely on the left. But now they get to reframe it because of the actions of a few numpties who call themselves on the right. You know, that's my opinion. Sometimes you have to think smart, and I just don't think enough people on the right think smartly. Finally tonight, a story of a small victory this week, but one I think that might give us some hope going on. So last night, Gammon Easter worshipper, somebody who I follow on Twitter, he follows me, alerted to my attention that if you typed in to Google search engine UK Prime Ministers, it would give you the thumbnails of all the Prime Ministers except Winston Churchill. His photo was removed, and his first tenure as Prime Minister in World War II, 1940 to 1945, that was also removed. What you got was a blank placeholder avatar, where his photo would normally go, listing him as Prime Minister only from 1951 to 1955, his second tenure. So he said, try it. And so I did. I went to Google and typed in list of UK Prime Ministers, and it was true. Churchill's photograph was not there. So I started thinking, what's going on here? So I did two things. First of all, I tweeted out myself saying, this is what's happened. Try it for yourself. Don't just believe what I'm saying in this tweet. Do go and try it for yourself. And then I thought, okay, we got to alert some people here that this has happened. So I encourage everybody who follows me to notify the Conservative commentariat and a few centrists as well, and sort of try and raise it with them and make a big stink. And so it went out to a lot of well-known people who identify as on the right somewhere along the line. And we got responses from Charlotte Gill, Helen Dale, the Delingpole brothers, and Toby Young. It was really nice. And using their sort of clout and gravitas, because I reckon my reach, combining my Twitter and YouTube channels, I reach probably about 1,000 people, and they've got considerable reach. So they were able to cause a stink. I also wrote to Google asking what was going on, asking for an explanation. Google came back saying that it was a technical issue. Now, somebody had been there had been lots of attempts to alter Churchill's Wikipedia page, and his photo got lost in the update. Apparently, that's why you couldn't see it. It was a temporary glitch, and they'll all get it all sorted out. Now, I don't think Google would have responded had we not called in the bigger guns to raise awareness here and made it go viral that night. I also think that the story sounds hollow. Now, some people have said, that could be true. It's a tech glitch problem, not malfeasance on the part of Google. But issues remain. For one thing, it wasn't just his photo that was removed. It was the text that accompanied it. So, Prime Minister 19 1940 to 1945, that had been removed. Likewise, if you typed in leaders of nations in World War II, again, his photo didn't turn up. His name would be there, but his country was not listed. All the other leaders had their country listed. So it didn't seem to ring true. Also, DuckDuckGo didn't have that problem. If you searched list of UK prime ministers on DuckDuckGo, you did get Churchill's photo and acknowledgement of him being wartime prime minister of the United Kingdom. So I've heard two reasonable explanations as to what possibly went on. One is not that it was Google company policy, that perhaps it was an individual or a team within Google acting on their own. Considering that Churchill had come into a lot of flack this week on the left, and the left were kind of denouncing him and vandalising his statue and demanding it be removed. So it's just very convenient that this happens at this time in this week. So that's one thing, that it was kind of rogue elements within Google. I can believe that because, James Damore's revelations about work life in Google and this drive to not do evil. Well, we've seen how the left interpret the concepts of good and evil, that you can do anything that is morally objectionable because you're on the side of good, and everybody who doesn't agree with you is necessarily on the side of evil. So they don't see this kind of thing as evil. The second plausible explanation is that Google are just firing a warning shot across the bows of the right and the normies, saying, we control the information here. And if we want to remove Churchill, we can remove Churchill. So those two things. Now, we on the right, we have difficulty coalescing and fighting as a united group because we differ on a number of principles. But I think there's a principle that certainly people on the mainstream right and conservatives can agree with. Perhaps libertarians won't go along with this, but I think everybody else might. It's the idea that history must stand. This is something I really want to get going as a hashtag history must stand. And that is, you cannot erase history. You can try, but it's not right to erase history or to alter it. It's wrong to do these things. History must stand, warts and all. And if you want to introduce a new hero as a statue, if you want to build a statue to some crusading human rights campaigner, fine, put the statue up, but you don't take Edward Colston's statue down. Don't take Winston Churchill's statue down. You don't get rid of Admiral Nelson. Everything must stand. The history, the records must stand, because I hear this argument, we just remove them and put them in the museum, right? And then you get rid of the museum, and then it's a two-step plan to alter and erase history. And so I say, hashtag history must stand. Use it wherever you can. And I said, this thing last night, it's a small victory. A lot of people did a lot of good work alerting prominent conservatives to what Google did last night, and Google issued a climb down today. And it's a small crumb of comfort. I know, not the big victory we're hoping for. We're still not out of the woods yet with the rise of the left. Who knows what's going to happen over the next week? But until that time, I wish you good night.